Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Trump reportedly approved, then abruptly called off military strikes targeting Iran Thursday night. The New York Times reports U.S. warplanes were already in the air, ready to attack, when Trump called the plan off. Trump initially okayed the strikes as retaliation for the downing of a U.S. drone by Iran Thursday. Iran maintains the drone had entered Iranian airspace, while the U.S. claims the drone was in international waters. Earlier on Thursday, Trump was asked about the incident.
Now, Iran made a big mistake. This drone was in international waters. Clearly, we have it all documented. It's documented scientifically, not just words. And they made a very bad mistake.
On Capitol Hill, Democratic lawmakers insisted President Trump must get approval before taking any military action. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer spoke to the press after meeting with Trump.
I told the president that these conflicts have a way of escalating. The president may not intend to go to war here, but we're worried that he and the administration may bumble into a war. We told the room that the Democratic position is that congressional approval must be required before funding any conflict in Iran.
We'll have more on Iran after headlines. The Republican-led Senate voted Thursday to block the sale of billions of dollars worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Key backers of the bipartisan bill included Republican Senator Lindsey Graham and Democrat Bob Melendez, who spoke before the vote.
We've heard that these weapons are humanitarian weapons. But when they are used to precisely target civilians, how can we possibly continue to sell them? These are components of bombs that we know have killed thousands of civilians in Yemen, patients in hospitals, children on school buses.
The House is also expected to pass the bill, but President Trump has threatened to veto the legislation. In related news, a British court has ruled British arms sales to Saudi Arabia were unlawful because the government did not consider whether they would be used to commit, quote, serious violations of international humanitarian law, unquote. The court's decision came in a case brought by the Campaign Against Arms Trade, which cited Saudi Arabia's use of British arms in its devastating war against Yemen. Andrew Smith, a spokesperson for Campaign Against Arms Trade, celebrated the ruling.
What this ruling makes clear is that for far, far too long, the UK government has looked the other way as tens of thousands of people have been brutally killed in the most devastating humanitarian crisis in the world.
A federal court has ruled the Trump administration can go ahead with plans to strip federal funding known as Title X for Planned Parenthood and other clinics that refer patients for abortions or even mention abortion as an option. The so-called domestic gag rule could threaten health care for millions of women who rely on Title X health centers for primary and preventive care. Planned Parenthood President Dr. Lena Wen said, quote, "The Trump-Pence administration's gag rule is unethical, illegal, and harmful to public health," unquote. Meanwhile, in related news, Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo has signed a bill to expand the protection of abortion rights and abortion providers in Rhode Island. The Associated Press is reporting some 250 infants, children, and teenagers have been locked up for up to 27 days without adequate food, water, and sanitation at a Border Patrol station near El Paso, Texas. One local lawyer said a sick 2-year-old boy was being treated by 3 girls between the ages of 10 and 15 because no one else was helping him. Children have been reportedly fed uncooked frozen food or rice and have gone weeks without bathing or clean clothes. Attorney Holly Cooper said, quote, "In my 22 years of doing visits with children in detention, I have never heard of this level of inhumanity." This comes as the Trump administration argued this week in federal court that the government is not required to provide soap, toothbrushes, or beds to children detained at the border. Justice Department Attorney Sarah Fabian made this argument before a 3-judge panel of the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco Tuesday. All three judges repeatedly questioned the government's claim. This is Judge Wallace Tashima.
If you don't have a toothbrush, if you don't have soap, if you don't have a blanket, it's not safe and sanitary. Well, wouldn't everybody agree to that? Do you agree to that?
Well, I think there's fair reason to find that those things may be part of safe and sanitary.
Maybe are a part. What do you say maybe? You mean there are circumstances when a person doesn't need to have a toothbrush, toothpaste, and soap for days?
Well, I think in CBP custody, it's frequently intended to be much shorter term. So it may be that for a shorter term stay in CBP custody that some of those things may not be required.
Judge Marcia Berzon also pointed out detained children have been forced to sleep on cold cement floors with just an aluminum blanket.
You're really going to stand up and tell us that being able to sleep isn't a question of safe and sanitary conditions?
Your Honor, I think what I'd like to stand up and say is to focus the court on what the question is.
In other immigration news, a group of Japanese Americans who were once held in U.S. internment camps are planning to protest outside Fort Sill in Oklahoma Saturday. During World War II, the U.S. government imprisoned about 700 people of Japanese ancestry at the base. There were over 100,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans imprisoned around the United States. Earlier this month, the Trump administration announced it would soon start holding migrant children at Fort Sill. Meanwhile, Colorado immigrant rights activist Jeanette Vizguera has been denied an application for a visa in her latest attempt to stay in the United States, where she's lived for almost a quarter of a century. Earlier this year, Jeanette Vizguera took sanctuary at the First Unitarian Society of Denver Church after her stay of deportation expired. She also spent 86 days in sanctuary at the church in 2017 before receiving her stay of deportation. She's the mother of 4 children, 3 of whom were born in the U.S. as American citizens. Visit democracynow.org to see our interviews with Jeanette Vizguera. In other immigration news, a federal judge in Massachusetts has blocked federal authorities from making immigration arrests inside the state's courthouses. This comes 2 months after federal prosecutors charged a Massachusetts state judge and a former court officer with obstruction of justice for allegedly helping an undocumented immigrant evade ICE agents at a district courthouse in the city of Newton, Massachusetts. In news from Central America, Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez has ordered the deployment of at least 25,000 military forces across the country as protests grow demanding his resignation. Anger against the authoritarian Hernandez administration has been building for years, but recent unrest was triggered in April amidst news of government plans to privatize health care, pensions, and education. An Ecuadorian judge has ordered the release of Swedish programmer, data privacy activist Ola Bini after over 2 months in jail. But Bini remains under investigation for allegedly hacking the Ecuadorian government and has been barred from leaving Ecuador. Bini is a friend of WikiLeaks editor Julian Assange and was arrested in Quito the same day Assange was forcibly taken by British authorities from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he'd lived for almost 7 years. Ola Bini briefly spoke Thursday after the court hearing before being removed by authorities.
I'm not free. I'm out of prison tomorrow, but I'm not free as long as this illegitimate investigation is going on. As long as this illegal persecution is going on, I am not going to be free. But we will prove my innocence, and this will be over. And they're trying to censor me. They're trying to stop me from talking to the press.
British parliamentarian Mark Field has been suspended after he grabbed a female climate protester by the neck and shoved her. The incident occurred when dozens of Greenpeace demonstrators staged a protest at a speech by British Finance Minister Philip Hammond. Police are now investigating to determine whether Field should be charged with assault. In California, the war crimes trial for Navy SEALs Special Operations Chief Edward Gallagher took a surprise turn Thursday when a Navy SEAL medic testified he, not Gallagher, was ultimately responsible for killing a wounded captive ISIS teenager in Iraq. The medic, Corey Scott, claimed he asphyxiated the teenager after Gallagher stabbed the victim. Scott described it as a mercy killing. Gallagher is also charged with attempted murder for shooting an Iraqi schoolgirl and an elderly man. Firefighters in Philadelphia battled a massive fire overnight after a large explosion at a 150-year-old refinery in South Philadelphia. This marked the second time this month emergency responders were called to the Philadelphia Energy Solutions refining complex, which produces 335,000 barrels of crude oil every day. It's said to be the largest such complex on the U.S. eastern seaboard. No injuries were reported, but nearby neighborhoods were ordered to shelter in place. In health news, U.S. suicide rates have reached the highest level since World War II. The overall suicide rate has jumped by 33% since 1999. The crisis is most severe in Indigenous communities. According to the Centers for Disease Control, the suicide rate for Indigenous women has increased by 139%. For Indigenous men, it's up 71%. And 8 peace activists were arrested Thursday while protesting U.S. drone strikes after they blocked the entrance to the Hancock Air National Guard base near Syracuse, New York. The base is home to the Air National Guard's 174th Attack Wing, which helps run overseas drone operations. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.